So I'm going to talk about power-ups and where the idea came from and how to use them and how to apply it and what I did with it and all of that, because I think it's a really cool idea that I've used a lot that's been very helpful. So I got the original idea from a book called Super Better, but it also came from two or three different books, and this is the idea that came from it. But in Super Better, it's about how people were overcoming depression and anxiety and cognitive fog, cognitive issues, and PTSD from general to specific for people that had like huge life traumas or injuries or illnesses. And what they were doing was turning their life into a game, like a video game, and then characterizing yourself and your circumstances, and then actively becoming the hero in your own story and literally creating the story as a game that you're playing, that you level up and you get stronger and you have enemies and you characterize the things that are your resistance, the things that you're battling that are causing you distress. You characterize them as the enemy and you are the hero and you battle them. And people coming up with this strategy of how to combat with the world by turning it into a game. They did a lot of research on how much they were getting better, and it was significant. The improvements from a wide variety of people and how much they were improving really stuck out to me. It was like, that's really a crazy idea that is creating such a huge improvement. You know, people go to therapy, people get on medications, and they see improvements, and they go through these different strategies, but the idea of just turning your life into a video game or a story or a book or whatever, and actually having that give people a huge amount of mental and emotional resilience and toughness to bounce back and battle with it. I thought it was a crazy cool concept. And the ideas and the domains that they try to tackle in the games and in the strategy of Super Better is the similar and the same exact domains that I talk about and I teach and that we use as our philosophy: mental, physical, emotional, social, and then we obviously have spiritual, intellectual, intuitional as a part of ours, but they were the same exact domains that they applied. So I was reading it and I was like, you don't have to be in the category of extreme suffering, extreme depression and anxiety and PTSD in order to get benefits out of it. Everybody could create the same idea and get huge benefits out of this. Every single person on the planet can use more mental and emotional toughness and resilience, more social and physical resilience. And you never know when life is going to sneak up on you and hit you with something. Like, it doesn't matter how mentally tough you are and emotionally stable you are. You never know when something in life is going to come up and surprise you and knock you down. And being stronger and being better and being more prepared is never a bad idea. So I was like, let's see if, how I could apply this and use it. And then I got thinking about it a lot lately with the whole COVID-19 lockdown situation and how people are responding to it, because there's a lot of people that are starting to suffer more and more each day because they're not able to do the things that they normally do that make them feel better. So they need to get a bigger toolbox and put more tools in it in order to handle the situation. So that's where all of this came from. But the categories for the power-ups, that's what we're talking about. So you are the hero. This is from the book. You are the hero of your story, and there are different things that you can do to power up, to battle with the enemy. Just like Super Mario Brothers. Mario would get a mushroom and he'd get bigger, he'd get stronger, he could be more resilient because he could take hits and he'd battle the enemy, or you get the star or the flower power or whatever. Any other video game you want to think of, you grab things and it powers you up. So it was broken down for physical resilience, which would be things like getting up, walking around, going for a run, doing squats. Mental, which would be thinking, brain activities. Emotional, which would be cheering you up, making you feel better, or things that would clear your head. And then social, which is anything that would create a positive social interaction. So those were the four categories that you were battling in, and you would want to create power-ups per category to use as your skill set. And I would call them like weapons. If you're in a video game, these are your weapons that you would use to battle the enemy. So when I went through this, I made my lists of different things that I thought would be power-ups for me to handle situations. So for me, the physical power-ups that I had were to do a set of 30 reps of push-ups or sit-ups or go for a run or a walk just to continuously move. And then to use a foam roller was actually one that would power me up physically. I would feel better physically, feel more resilient physically. I'd be more willing to do things physically if I just, foam rolled for 2 minutes. For mental resilience, my power-ups were to solve riddles. If I needed a mental break from whatever I was doing, I'd look up a riddle or a game of riddles and try to solve them. I'd test myself on something new that I had learned. I'd try to do puzzles, mental or actually just a puzzle that's out in front of me. Or an exercise that I really enjoy doing is writing down exactly what would be required of me to make progress towards and ultimately accomplish the goal that I want to accomplish, and then how I could endure gaining what was required. Because for the most part, the thing that you need to level up, the thing that you need to be more resilient, the thing that you need to be more resilient mentally and emotionally and stay combative with the world is wisdom and perspective. And the things that you have to go through to gain wisdom and perspective are usually difficult and painful. So that was a fun mental toughness and mental resilience exercise that I still like to do now. For emotional resilience, I would listen to somebody speak. I really liked listening to E.T. for motivation, Jordan Peterson or Jocko for a really good perspective. There were specific songs that I would listen to that would make me feel good, feel better. And then I would write down all the things that I'm thankful and grateful for, and that would really help me emotionally. And then socially, I would send a text message or an email to very specific people. That was my list of power-ups that I would use whenever I needed them. And then what I would do is I would test them, and I would test them often, and then I would take notes on how well they worked in which situations, and then I would update those notes as we would go, and I would update and refine the power-ups. And the objective there was to make them into a very specific weapon to use in the moment. So you need some emotional resilience. Listening to a motivational speaker or finding a video on YouTube that's going to motivate you is too vague and probably time-consuming sometimes. And if you have one that you like for a little bit and then you listen to it too much and it no longer gives you that feeling anymore, then it's going to wear down and break. So we needed a very specific action to a very specific thing to a very specific touch point in order to weaponize that power up. That was my strategy. So I'd write it down, and then I'd work my way through it like that. Then the next step of Super Better and the things that I did also were to take the bad guys, and I also turn them into levels. And the purpose of having them and the power-ups was that you would actively find the bad guys and engage in battle with them so you can overcome them. And a bad guy or a level is literally anything that blocks your progress toward the goal or that is causing you anxiety or pain or distress. And you would take them and you would characterize them. And I love that idea because what that was, the idea of the power-ups and the bad guys in the game was for you to confront your dragon. It's a Jordan Peterson thing that I love. You have to confront your dragon to get your gold. That dragon is sitting in its lair and it's guarding all of your stuff. And if you continue to ignore it, that dragon's going to grow bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And no matter what you do, it's inevitable. One day you're going to have to face that dragon, whatever your dragon is, the thing that you're afraid of facing. One day you're going to have to, and the longer you put it off, the bigger and stronger that thing gets, and the harder the battle's going to be. So what you should do is seek out your dragon, confront it, and squash it while it's still small. Don't let it get bigger and bigger. And that's the idea here to an extent with the bad guys and the levels. Like, they are there, they're getting stronger every day if you don't resist them and battle them. And the power-ups make you more resilient so that you can actively come up with strategies to go battle them, which was cool. So that's where I also thought about weaponizing the power-ups. It's a power-up, but it's also a weapon to wield against them, to strike down the bad guys. So some examples of supervillains or levels from the book were from the same 4 categories, and they were really creative. So an example in the book for a physical domain, physical resilience, mega boss supervillain was the sticky chair. And it looks like a couch, but it traps you. When you sit down on it, it traps you for hours and prevents you from doing things. So that would be a physical supervillain that you would characterize and write down on another list. A social villain was called solitary confinement. And what that villain did was freeze you where you are and prevent you from having any meaningful interactions with anybody else in your life, any other humans. A mental supervillain was the two-headed monster, T-O-O. And it would sneak up on you when you're not expecting it, and you'd catch yourself once it had already gotten you using statements, I'm too statements, like I'm too old, I'm too fat, I'm too this, I'm too that, or any other explanation of why you can't or won't do the thing that you actually want to do. And then an emotional supervillain was the guilty twin. And it's a twin that takes and twists every positive feeling that you have into a negative one that is self-blaming and targets you as unworthy and as the cause of all the negatives, and makes you feel guilty about yourself and the situation. And that's 4 examples of what the supervillains were. And then there would be a strategy on how to overcome each one. So the strategy to combat the sticky chair, the physical beast, was stand up for a full 5 seconds, count it out. And then after that, you can decide what you want to do. You can sit back down and watch TV, or you'll get up and go do the next tasks. As long as you stand up for a full 5 count, you get to decide. So you break that hold on what the villain is. So if we take that as an example, you are trapped by the character, the supervillain, the sticky chair. And then you know that your strategy to combat it is to stand up and count to 5, and then you're going to regain control so you can do things. But you don't really feel very resilient right now, mentally, physically, emotionally. You're beat. You don't want to get up for a 5 count because you're just so wrecked. That's when you would reach for your super or your power-ups, whatever they happen to be, so that you can gain the mental, emotional, social, physical resilience and power to combat the sticky chair, even though that's a physical one. We're talking about getting up and exercising for right now. I don't want to do my workout of the day. I'm trapped in my chair, the sticky chair, okay? I'm not just being lazy. This villain has me. So now we're playing a game. I am not at fault. I have a pity party. I'm playing a game. The supervillain, the sticky chair, has me trapped. What do? I just stand up and count to 5, but physically I can't do it right now. I really don't want to. I'm just depressed, beat down. Well, if I went to my personal list of power-ups, I could, the faster ones would be to look up some sort of riddles or puzzles on my phone just to get my brain thinking. Some emotional power-ups would be to listen to somebody speak, like a motivational speech from E.T. or a thought-provoking reflection, personal development from Jordan Peterson or Jocko, and that would really get you moving. I could send text to my friends to get some social resilience. Just anybody encourage me to stand up for 5 seconds, I'd stand up and I'd break it. And that would be, the strategy to overcome that thing, which ended up being really cool. I had a list of supervillains, and we'll go through all that stuff at some point in the future, but the whole idea of characterizing yourself and characterizing the resistance, the things that are holding you back, and then coming up with strategies to overcome them and power-ups, and it was just super, super cool. So applying it really made a big difference for me and everybody that I've suggested it to, and we just get them, we write them on a note card. Before we moved into this house, I had my office, and on the wall of my office were the villains and the power-ups. And anytime something happened, I would just look at it. And that's what made it super useful. Just the idea in your brain's not the same as writing it down. That's a big part of it. Like if you're playing a video game, there's a physical video game. There's a screen. Your stats are up on the screen. You're looking at the development. You're seeing the enemies. You're seeing the levels. You're seeing the progressions. So you got to put it somewhere physical that you can see it. So I put it up on the wall, and anytime I had these feelings, I'd look at it and I'd characterize the thing that was holding me back, and I'd pick a power up. And a lot of the times, because of owning a business and being in this situation, it's mental and emotional. You'd get burnt out, self-doubt. You'd get anxious and depressed about every single thing that was happening. Like tasks are too great to overcome, and you just have this sense that your business is going to go under at any point if you're not working 24/7 and being perfect, things like that. So they'd pop up, and I'd pull something from the list, and I'd battle it, and I'd take notes, and it was a really cool and effective thing. And I think now's a really good time for me to bring that back and introduce some people to that, which is why I gave it as the assignment for the day, was to come up with a list of power-ups that you think. So you can break it down into, the power-ups can be anything you want. Doesn't matter. You can categorize it. You don't have to. But I like categorizing it because it helps you face specific enemies specific villains, specific bad guys at specific times, and helps you build a better strategy and helps you weaponize them a little bit more effectively based on the situations. But ultimately, it really doesn't matter as long as you have something that's going to give you a jolt, a wake-up call, or help, or support, or whatever it is. So I gave that as the assignment. Physical power-ups, mental power-ups, emotional power-ups, and social power-ups. And all you're going to do is just make a list of them. I didn't even get into most, like this is a very small portion. I've been talking for like 15 minutes of the entire gamification of life and how that ends up being a really cool strategy for accomplishing the goals that we want to accomplish in the gym and outside of the gym and long-term strategy. I barely scratched the surface, but we don't need to get that far. Just the idea of a power. If you understand power-ups to battle the enemies in any sense at all, then you can come up with a list of power-ups, things that will give you something. That's how we're going to start with this. Just come up with a list of power-ups and write it down, and you can share it with me. We'll have to circle back to this because it is approaching 2 o'clock in the morning right now, which is cool. This is fun.